All right, so we'll wrap this up reviewing renal and acid base and some fluid balance stuff, some electrolyte balance. Hope everything is going decently for you as I sit here eating some fudge brownie M&Ms, like regular M&Ms, but instead of chocolate inside, fudge brownie inside. Yeah, it's freaking awesome. This whole stay-at-home nonsense is going to end up making me weigh about 700 pounds. All right, so like I said, this should be the last of these. It's just whiteboard only. The next lectures, which will be digestive and reproductive, will be more in-person stuff. This weekend, Saturday, and I'll make a formal announcement for this through your Blackboard email. Saturday, uh, I'll have office hours posted. I'm going to unlock your exam before then, and then I'll have office hours. And if you have questions about anything that's there, you can show up for like a Zoom meeting and we'll walk through that. Your exam's going to be rather open-ended in terms of time. I mean, there will be a time limit on it, but it's going to be lengthy. You'll have more than enough time to complete the exam. All right. So, renal function. We didn't have a lot of time to get to the details of renal function, and your exam will reflect what you need to know. The working part of the renal, or the kidney. Nephron. The nephron. All right. Things going on in nephron, and you have a lecture slide for this, but things going on in the nephron. You have filtration, reabsorption, secretion. All right. Let's talk about what goes on where. And then first part of the nephron is the glomerulus, which is like a spaghetti ball of capillaries there, capsule around it. You have an afferent arteriole that's coming in, and an efferent arteriole that's going out. The afferent one is bigger than the efferent one, so you get pressure in between. You get a higher net filtration pressure. Because the afferent arteriole is bigger than the efferent arteriole, you get increased pressure here. That's bigger, you get a higher net filtration pressure at the glomerulus. And that higher net filtration pressure forces fluid out of the blood into the capsular space. Now we call it filtrate. And the kidneys filter the entire volume of your blood 60 times a freaking day. And of that fluid that they filter out right now, 99% of it's going to go right back in the bloodstream. If they didn't reclaim any of the fluid, you'd pee out the volume of your plasma in a matter of hours. We don't do that because the next thing that happens, here in the glomerulus, this is filtration. And stuff's got to go through the filter, right? And you do need to know the parts of the kidney's filtration membrane. The filtration membrane consists of the fenestrated capillary, the podocytes, wrapped around them, and then their fused membranes. Fused basement membrane. In the bloodstream, and you want to get out into this capsular space, you got to go through this. So here is our blood. Out here is the capsular space. So space out here, capsular space. Now, wrapped around that capillary, we got those podocytes. And so if you've got something in the blood, it has to go through multiple things here. Not only does it have to fit through the little holes in the capillaries, the fenestrated capillary, it has to fit through the little hole between the podocytes, the filtration slits. And so big stuff isn't fitting through there. You got to be little tiny things, and fluid is going to go out into that capsular space where it becomes filtrate. And now that filtrate is going to go out into the tubule system. The first part of that tubule system is the proximal convoluted tubule. Here in the proximal convoluted tubule, we get bulk reabsorption. Most of the stuff you just shoved out goes right back in the blood here. So as you would expect, the cells of this proximal convoluted tubule have lots of surface area. We see lots of microvilli. We see lots of mitochondria, because these are cells that are specialized for transport. Microvilli increase surface area. Mitochondria power those transport pumps, ion pumps that are going to use ATP. Mitochondria making ATP. Most of the stuff gets reabsorbed here. This includes all organic nutrients. All right, like I said, concerns here. Because of the way this is, and I know that you've got access to resources and you're not having to just straight up remember this stuff, I'm more concerned with a little bit of critical thinking here. So here, as we talk about bulk reabsorption, we have these cells in the proximal convoluted tubule. Microvilli, lots of surface area. You get the idea. Surface area, etc. All right, so in that cell membrane, blood here, filtrate here. All right, so you got stuff out here in the filtrate. Now, in the cell membrane, you're going to get these ion pumps. And each one of those is going to grab onto whatever it's supposed to. Ion, I suppose. But it's going to grab that stuff, and then we're going to get transcytosis. Go in, go out. But notice here in my expertly drawn, beautifully drawn drawing, that in these wonky-looking cells, there are two of those proteins for each cell. That means that if it's currently got whatever that green spot is, they can't get any more. It's busy right now. There's a finite number of these membrane proteins. So there's a finite amount of solute that you can move back into the blood. We call this the transport max. Transport maximum. All right, so now let's apply, like I said, critical thinking stuff. Say your little green thing right there is glucose. All right, if that's glucose, and each one of these can grab like one of those glucose molecules and move it back in. And I realize it's not this. It's a sodium glucose cotransport. Not worried about that right now. This is just simplicity. just to illustrate this idea of transport maximum. So if that's glucose, and there's a finite amount of them, that means that the rest of this glucose, well, what's it going to do? It's not going to stay there. This fluid is moving. So if you exceed the amount of transport proteins, if you exceed that transport maximum, the rest of that organic nutrient will be in the urine. There is no mechanism to reclaim organic nutrients past the proximal convoluted tubule. Now let's apply. All right, we've talked about this in the past. We have diabetes mellitus caused by a lack of insulin from the pancreas. That decreased insulin from the pancreas means that your blood glucose is extremely elevated. Now that glucose is going to get filtered out at the glomerulus. It's going to enter the proximal convoluted tubule. There is so much glucose in the blood that it easily exceeds the transport maximum of the proximal convoluted tubule. Now that glucose will then be stuck in the filtrate. And from the filtrate, it's going to be in the urine. This is responsible for many of the symptoms that we see in diabetic patients. As this glucose becomes an osmotic diuretic, meaning that it's a dissolved particle in the filtrate. Water follows stuff around. Now I've got this dissolved particle in the filtrate. It's going to pull water from those peritubular capillaries into the tubule system. What are some of the symptoms that we see of diabetes? Increased urination. You've always got to pee. Because you're losing more water because glucose is pulling it into the urine, the filtrate. Other symptoms that we see. Glucose in the urine is really one of the big symptoms. There's glucose in the urine. That says a lot toward that diabetes diagnosis. Other symptoms we see. So if you're losing water, and this ties a little further into our discussion today, fluid balances. If you're losing this water, dehydration, which is going to trigger thirst receptors. You're always going to be. So there's another one. They're always thirsty because you're losing so much water to the urine. As long as we're here and we're talking about diuretics, let's cover that. So a diuretic increases urine output. It can be what we just talked about. It can be osmotic, like glucose. It just pulls water toward the filtrate in the tubule system. But we could just as easily block sodium reabsorption. If we block the kidneys from reabsorbing sodium, we also block the kidneys from reabsorbing water. Let's see. We could stop antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone is just what it sounds like. It's an antidiuretic. You stop the release of ADH, you just created a diuretic. You should know that ADH opens water channels on the collecting duct. of the nephron so that water can be reabsorbed. So you block that, then you block water reabsorption. What is an ADH inhibitor? ADH inhibitors include alcohol. And if you've ever been out drinking, you should have some experience with it. All right, so you go to the bar, you drink for a while, then you have to pee, breaking the seal. Once you do, you've got alcohol in play now, and alcohol inhibits antidiuretic hormone. So now all the fluid that you're bringing in, you're not going to be reclaiming the water out of that fluid. You're not going to be reclaiming the water out of the blood. After this point, you've got to keep, like, you don't have to pee all the time because alcohol is a diuretic. Alcohol is a diuretic because it inhibits antidiuretic hormone. Other things are diuretics. Caffeine's a diuretic because it blocks up sodium reabsorption. The excess glucose is an osmotic diuretic. There are lots of ways we can do this. All right, back to our filtration thing. So we have filtration, we have bulk reabsorption in the proximal convoluted tubule. Then we have our nephron loop, or the loop of Henle. This is where we're going to reclaim more water and electrolytes. We did not get into the whole countercurrent mechanism, so I'm not concerned with that. We're going to leave it at this. And then we finally have the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. This is fine tuning, and it's hormonally controlled. Hormones like parathyroid hormone and aldosterone and atrial natriuretic peptide and antidiuretic hormone, etc., will all have actions here at the distal convoluted tubule. This is your last chance to vary stuff. You've got parathyroid hormone, you're going to reclaim calcium. You've got aldosterone, you're going to reclaim sodium. Antidiuretic hormone, reclaim water. So lots of different hormones in play here. But I'm worried about the big picture here of your information. Filtration, reabsorption, secretion. Also going to happen here at the distal convoluted tubule. Aldosterone is one of our more important hormones here. You should remember that aldosterone not only does sodium reabsorption, but also does potassium excretion. Sodium and potassium pretty much hate each other. They're always going to go in opposite directions. So if you reabsorb sodium, you're getting rid of potassium. In fact, one of our triggers for aldosterone release is hyperkalemia. Your potassium levels go up, adrenal cortex releases aldosterone, you pee out that potassium. All right, so we do this whole thing. We end up with urine. Urine goes from the kidney to the ureter to the bladder. It's stored in the bladder. You pee it out. Golden. That was not intentionally a pun. All right, so urine. This is what I'm concerned with, big picture of the kidney. I'm not, well, okay, so there is a little bit here that I'm worried about. You should know that the kidneys release renin, the major part of that renin-angiotensin mechanism. Renin comes from granular cells in something called the juxtaglomerular apparatus. And they're modified smooth muscle cells in the afferent arteriole. Basically, it's an indicator of blood flow to the kidneys. When the kidneys don't have enough blood flow, they release renin. It sets off that renin-angiotensin mechanism, raises your blood pressure. Kidneys get their blood flow back. But none of the kidneys are releasing renin, part of that renin-angiotensin mechanism. Kidneys make erythropoietin, stimulus red blood cell formation. GFR is glomerular filtration rate. That's really an indicator of kidney function. But again, we didn't have time to go into a lot of detail. Our other topic here is fluid electrolyte balance, extracellular, intracellular fluids, and electrolytes. You should remember that sodium is intracellular, potassium is extracellular. Sodium inside the cells, potassium outside. I talked about fluid balance in these fluid compartments, dehydration, hypotonic hydration. Review that briefly, but don't spend a lot of time with it. I'm not really worried about other electrolytes, hormonal control. One of the odd things is there's not actually any receptors for sodium. We don't have like sodium detection. All the mechanisms that control sodium balance in the body control blood pressure, aldosterone, atrial natriuretic peptide, all of those things, all those hormones that are involved there, they use sodium as a mechanism, but there's not like receptors for sodium that are detecting sodium. Sodium balance is tied to water balance, and water balance is pressure. There's that. Don't spend a lot of time with that. You should know sodium's outside the cells, potassium inside the cells, and I may have just written that backwards. Did I write that backwards? Yep. All right, ignore this completely. Oh. Sodium is the major extracellular cation. Sodium outside. Potassium is the major intracellular cation. Potassium inside. I said it backwards to begin with. I'm correcting myself. I'm not good enough to edit it out yet. And I'm not erasing this whole thing. Sodium outside, potassium inside. Okay. Now, of more importance, arterial blood gas. There will be a couple of these arterial blood gas problems on here. And on these arterial blood gas problems, you'll be given the patient's pH, partial pressure carbon dioxide, and bicarbonate levels. So let's do this. We have a patient with a pH, blood pH 7.25, pressure carbon dioxide in that blood is 60 millimeters of mercury. And your concentration of bicarbonate there is 23 milliequivalents per liter. All right, the questions that you're going to have to answer on these sorts of problems is, one, is this acidosis or alkalosis? Well, the pH is lower than 7.35. Remember that your normal pH is 7.35 to 7.45. Well, this is lower than that, so that makes this acidosis. Now let's determine the cause of that acidosis. Now, your concentration of bicarbonate is 22 to 24 milliequivalents per liter. That's normal. So you should already know that the bicarbonate's not the cause. Carbon dioxide's the cause. Carbon dioxide, it's 35 to 45 millimeters of mercury is normal. This is way higher than that. So this is acidic. And so that makes this respiratory acidosis. Carbon dioxide's the source of your problem. It's respiratory in nature. Too much carbon dioxide. What would cause too much carbon dioxide? How can you, right now, put more carbon dioxide in your blood? Hold your damn breath. Carbon dioxide will build up in your blood, and you will have to breathe again because the carbon dioxide built up in your blood. So, this patient has acidosis because they're not breathing enough. Respiratory acidosis is not breathing enough. It's hypoventilation. That carbon dioxide is trapped in you. This would be something we might see in someone who's in respiratory distress. These systems try to balance each other. They try to compensate for it. Let's look at that idea. Let's take a patient with a pH, again, of like 7.2, and we have a partial pressure of carbon dioxide, like 15 millimeters of mercury, and a bicarb level of like, say, 10 milliequivalents per liter. All right, so again, it's acidosis because we're below 7.35. Carbon dioxide, that's way, way, way low. Low carbon dioxide is alkaline. That's alkalosis. Your problem here is not alkalosis. Your problem is acidosis. So that's not it. Now, here, bicarbonate levels are also low. Bicarbonate levels are low. That's acidosis. So your bicarbonate levels are the source of your problem. If the bicarbonate levels are the source of your problem, that's metabolic acidosis. What would cause metabolic acidosis? Well, diabetic ketoacidosis. Ketone bodies created in diabetes are acidic, and that acid starts to tie up the bicarbonate in the blood because the blood is a buffer. And as that bicarbonate is tied up, your lungs are going to attempt to compensate for that. And so this patient is breathing faster. Let's make a chart here. All right. So if the pH is less than 7.3, that's acidosis. If the pH is greater than 7.45, that's alkalosis. If the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is greater than 45 millimeters of mercury, that's respiratory acidosis. If it's less than 35 millimeters of mercury, that's respiratory alkalosis. If your bicarb level is greater than 26 milliequivalents per liter, That's metabolic alkalosis. And if that bicarb level is less than 22 milliequivalents per liter, that's metabolic acidosis. Now, of these conditions, respiratory acidosis is going to be your most common. Probably then it will be metabolic acidosis and then respiratory alkalosis. Metabolic alkalosis is easily the rarest of these conditions. In fact, your body is not set up for that. It takes a lot to get to the alkaline level because your metabolism is inherently creating acid. So we're set up to neutralize that acid. Even in alkalosis, the kidneys are still going to be regenerating more bicarbonate than they are excreting. So as we're here in this arterial blood gas, we do need to talk about those three lines of defense that you have against pH change, the three buffers. We have chemical buffers, like the bicarbonate buffer in the blood. It's frontline, it's fast, but it's very limited in its capacity. And we have the physiological buffers. We have respiratory and renal. The renal buffer here is the slowest, but the most powerful, because only the kidneys actually lose that hydrogen proton. They get rid of the actual acid part of acid. The respiratory tract's just buffering it with the whole carbon dioxide, carbonic acid thing. Chemical buffers are just buffering it temporarily, tying it into carbonic acid or disassociating that. Only the kidneys are actually getting rid of it, getting it completely out of the body. So, three buffers. This is fastest to slowest and weakest to most powerful. But like I said, these systems try to compensate for each other. When you have a patient that's entering diabetic ketoacidosis, diabetic ketoacidosis, they'll start breathing faster to try to compensate for that. And it may balance out. So when you work these arterial blood gas problems, you'll have three questions. Sometimes four. First is, what is it? Acidosis, or alkalosis? And then you have to identify the cause. Is it respiratory or metabolic? Then you have to ask yourself, is it compensated for? Is one system trying to compensate for the other? In that prior example that we gave, say for example, was a decent example of compensation. Up somehow. All right. So this is a decent example of compensation. You can tell it's compensated when you have one value that's causing the problem. So this is metabolic acidosis, because your overall problem up here is acidosis, and the bicarbonate is also acidosis. So this is metabolic acidosis. But this number, if you look at this number by itself, That's respiratory alkalosis. That's the opposite of your pH. That's compensation. When one of the values is the opposite of your problem, that's compensation. When these two things are opposing, that means one's compensating for the other. They're never both going to be the same way. One will always work to try to correct for the other. All right, so again, hypoventilation, that's respiratory acidosis. Hyperventilation is respiratory alkalosis. Okay, with that, I think I've covered everything that I've got on this exam. Now, I'll get it up soon. It won't be tonight. It'll probably be tomorrow sometime, and the window will be pretty big. Make sure you look at your stupid blackboard and take the exam. We'll worry about the lab shortly thereafter. I'm not super concerned with the lab. I mean, it's labeling diagrams, and you're obviously just going to look it up and copy the freaking labels anyway. But we're still going to do it just for the show. So at least you have some familiarity with the words. Starting next week, daily, you'll have, and I'll probably draw home as soon as I get them, maybe all at once. You'll have lectures for the rest of the semester posted. There's already a final review posted on your Blackboard. We'll cover those concepts in the lectures. We'll get ready for that exam, and then we'll be good. Again, hope you're staying safe. For those of you that have a positive diagnosis, if you have any lab results or anything that you'd like to share, send me an email. Um, the the data is useful in terms of future references. This is going to be an issue, obviously. So just for future clinical things in class, your data points would be useful, or your labs, if you've got any labs on in terms of oxygen saturation. If you have a CT scan of your lungs that you'd love to share, throw that in the anatomos table. Not to capitalize on your illness, and like I said, if there's anything I can do for you there, let me know. But if you have anything you want to share with the rest of us, let me know, and we'll use it as a teaching tool in the future. So take it easy. Look for your exam soon. Between now and then, if you have any questions, let me know. Over the weekend, like I said, we'll schedule office hours. As soon as we get this done, we'll get to move forward. And the last of this is the fun part, and reproduction stuff you already know. I've been to the lab, so I have models here at the house. And we'll finish. So good night, and I will see you soon, at least virtually.